All right, let's dive into this. Integrative psychotherapy. We're gonna really get into it, like what it is, where it came from, and we've got some interesting stuff here. Academic texts, excerpts about techniques. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where psychotherapy is going. Seems like it's moving away from, those strict old schools towards a more, personalized way of doing things,
Yeah.
more holistic.
So first things first, what is integrative psychotherapy, right? I mean, one of our sources says combining concepts and interventions from different approaches. So is it less about sticking to one theory and more about a framework?
You got it. It's not just mixing techniques randomly, right? It's about finding the best fit for each person, like a tailor-made approach.
Hmm.
No single theory can do that, for everyone and every problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like having a toolbox, right? You pick the right tool for the job. But where did this whole integration idea come from? Historically, I mean.
Well, formally, it kind of kicked off in the 70s. Richard Erskine, Institute for Integrative Psychotherapy, they were some of the first to really see the limits of just sticking to one school of thought.
Right, right. That must have been a pretty big deal back then. Any pushback?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like any field, psychotherapy has its, let's call them ideological differences, right?
Hmm.
Different schools thought they had the only way, so there was more competition than collaboration sometimes.
Huh. A therapy Cold War. So how'd this move towards integration actually play out?
Well, some say it goes way back, even to Freud, but it was really the later 20th century when things got going. Dollard and Miller, they tried bridging psychoanalysis and learning theory. And Paul Wackel, he was big on connecting psychoanalysis with behavior therapy. Then we saw societies popping up like SEPI, journals dedicated to it, the whole 9 yards.
Wow, so this really picked up steam. But before we go further, what about integrative versus eclectic therapy? Is there a difference?
Great question. There is. It's subtle. Think of it like this integration is like, carefully picking fresh ingredients to cook a meal. Eclecticism is more like grabbing whatever's at a buffet. Might be tasty, but not as well thought out.
Uh-huh, I like that. It shows the thoughtfulness behind integration. Paul Wachtel said something that really resonated with me. He talked about a considered methodical attempt to bring theories and practices together. So it's not just what works, but why.
Totally. And that leads to the big question. Why did this integration thing take off? What was happening in therapy that made this approach so, well, appealing?
Yeah, what were the driving forces?
Well, for one thing, the sheer number of therapies was exploding. Therapists were starting to see that, hey, no single theory can handle everything and everyone, right?
So having too many tools and not knowing which to use?
Yeah, something like that. And they were realizing that different therapies, even with different theories, have things in common that really work. Like the therapeutic relationship, facing challenges, having corrective emotional experiences. Those things are important no matter the technique.
Wait, hold on. That's really interesting. Can you unpack that? Why are those common factors, as you called them, so important for, you know, the listener?
It's a shape in thinking, right? Instead of arguing about theories, we're looking at the core of what makes therapy work. Having a good connection with your therapist, feeling safe to explore tough emotions, believing you can change, that's where the magic happens.
Hmm.
And it means we can use techniques from different schools while sticking to those core principles.
So instead of theory wars, it's about what actually helps people get better.
Exactly. And it's not about ditching the old ways. It's about having more options to help each person.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But there must be different ways to do integration, right? It's not one size fits all.
Right, again, it's a spectrum. You've got everything from, well, eclecticism, which we talked about, to theoretical integration. That one's complex, like merging the ideas behind different schools to make a whole new theory.
Ambitious.
It is. Then you have assimilative integration, where you have a main theory, but you're open to adding things from other systems.
Like having a home base, but still exploring.
Right. You got it. Then there's the common factor approach, focusing on those core elements we talked about, building on what unites different therapies.
Right, the common ground. And our sources mention multi-theoretical approaches, too.
Those are important too. It's about using two or more theories together, but not merging them completely. They provide a framework, like the transtheoretical model. It's about stages of change and using techniques that fit each stage. Or Brooks Harris's multi-theoretical model, which considers thoughts, actions, feelings, but also your biology, relationships, culture. It's a lot.
So many ways to do integration. Really fascinating how personalized it can be.
And that leads us to EMDR and EFT. They often come up in integrative therapy.
Okay, yeah, those were the ones I was most curious about. Can you give us the rundown?
Sure. So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's for processing trauma and negative beliefs. It's about unlocking those stuck memories through eye movements so your brain can reprocess the trauma and reduce its power.
So like rewiring the brain, creating new pathways.
That's a good way to think about it. Then there's EFT, emotional freedom technique. You tap on specific points on your body to balance your energy system. It can help with emotional and physical issues.
I read you can even do EFT remotely. That's amazing for accessibility.
It is. Shows how adaptable these approaches can be. But, all this talk about techniques brings up a big question. How do we know what really works? How do we ensure we're using evidence-based stuff?
Right, that's crucial. Where does evidence-based practice fit in all this? How do therapists know if their integrative approach is actually helping?
That's a key point. Integrative therapists, like all therapists, have to be rigorous about the research behind the techniques they use.
Ah,
There are resources like the Cochrane Collaboration and the National Guideline Clearinghouse that offer reviews of research on therapies. Really helpful for making informed decisions.
so it's like being a scientist and an artist at the same time, staying current on research, but also tailoring it to each person.
Exactly. And speaking of the future, where do you think psychotherapy is going?
Yeah, I'm curious what our sources say about that.
Well, experts predict approaches like cognitive behavioral therapy, multicultural counseling, interpersonal therapy, and family systems therapy will keep growing. And they see a trend towards shorter-term, more focused therapies.
So maybe less of the longer term, less structured approaches.
That's the prediction, yeah. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But integrative therapy is definitely shaping the future of mental health.
Wow, we've covered so much. From defining integrative psychotherapy to its history, the different approaches, and evidence-based practice.
It's been a great overview.
It has. And there's definitely more to uncover. It strikes me, this whole integrative thing, it's kind of how we learn in life, right? We're always like adding new stuff to how we see the world.
Totally. It's like we don't just stick to one book or one opinion, we piece things together.
Yeah.
Just like integrative therapy does with all these different approaches.
Yeah, exactly. And like everyone's different, right? Different personalities, different experiences. Integrative psychotherapy gets that. It's tailored to the person, not just their diagnosis.
Like it's a custom-made suit, not a one-size-fits-all thing. What works for one person, might not work for another. But how does it actually work? How does a therapist decide what approaches to use?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. Like, what would a client actually experience?
Well, it starts with a really thorough assessment, understanding the client's history, their issues, their personality, culture, even what they want out of therapy, the whole picture.
So it's collaborative right from the start.
Absolutely. It's a partnership. And based on that understanding, the therapist then picks, the right tools from their toolbox.
Okay, so let's say someone comes in with anxiety. How might that look, through an integrative lens?
Okay, so anxiety, right? The therapist might start with, say, cognitive techniques, looking at their thoughts, beliefs about the anxiety. Maybe they'll help them spot those negative thinking patterns. But maybe they also see that there's some past trauma feeding into it, so they might use some EMDR to work through that.
So they're getting at both the current thoughts and the deeper stuff.
Exactly. And let's say they notice the client's holding a lot of tension. They might bring in some mindfulness stuff to help them, be more aware of their body, regulate their nervous system.
It's amazing how those different techniques can, work together.
That's the beauty of it, We're complex. Our mental health struggles are complex. Makes sense to have multiple tools.
Makes total sense. And you know what? It's got to be really empowering for the client too, right?
How so?
Well, having a say in their treatment, seeing how it's all tailored to them, it must give them a sense of control, of agency. It's not just something happening to them. They're a part of it.
You're so right. That sense of ownership, that can be super healing in itself. It builds confidence, belief, and change. Which brings us to another cool thing about integrative therapy. Bridging the gap between research and, what actually happens in therapy.
Now, that's something I've always wondered about. How does research actually get into the therapy room?
It's a good question, right? There's often been this disconnect between research and practice. Integrative therapy helps bridge that gap, encouraging therapists to use research, while still honoring each client's individuality.
So it's not about following a script, but using research to inform those decisions, make it fit the person.
Exactly. It's the art and science of therapy, the best of both worlds.
I like that. It makes therapy feel more alive, more responsive. It makes me think about the therapist, though. What kind of person can actually do this? Integrative therapy seems like it takes a special set of skills.
Oh, absolutely. They got to be adaptable, flexible, always learning. Skilled in a lot of techniques, comfortable switching between perspectives.
It's more than just having the tools, right? It's knowing how to use them. With sensitivity, I mean.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even more important are, good people skills, empathy, genuine curiosity about the client.
Mm.
That relationship is everything.
As we're talking, it hits me. Integrative therapy, it's not just about therapy, is it? It's almost like a way of life.
What do you mean?
Well, being open to different ideas, willing to learn and grow, knowing there's no one right answer for everything, therapy and life.
I love that. You're right. There's something deeper there. It's embracing complexity, acknowledging that, different strokes for different folks.
And that's powerful stuff even outside the therapy room.
Totally. It can guide us in how we connect with others, our work, how we grow as people.
This has been so eye-opening. Feels like we've only just, dipped our toes in.
So much to explore for sure. But hopefully it's given our listener a good sense of this, evolving approach.
Definitely. I know I'll be thinking about this long after we're done. But for now, let's move to our final segment. We'll look at some of the challenges of integrative therapy and what the future might hold. All right, so final part of our deep dive. And, it's been really fascinating, but gotta be real, right? Every approach has its, challenges. Integrative therapy, too, I'm sure.
For sure. As much potential as it has, there are some complexities to consider. I mean, just the sheer amount of knowledge and skill it takes to be a good integrative therapist, that's a hurdle right there.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not just dipping your toes into different theories, right? You gotta
Oh,
really know them.
exactly. It takes a lot of training, supervision, always learning. It's not something you just pick up in a weekend workshop.
Yeah, I can see that being tough for therapists used to, like a more structured approach. Integrative seems way more fluid, less by the book.
That's a good point. It's not like you have a manual to follow, It's about judgment,
Yeah,
adapting to each person.
it's like, I don't know, like a chef, right? You have all these ingredients, you gotta know which to use, how to combine them to make something great.
Love that analogy. But yeah, that brings up a potential downside. You can become a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yeah, if you try to do too much without really understanding any one approach deeply, it's gonna be, messy.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to have that strong foundation in like one or two core theories while also being knowledgeable about others.
Finding that balance, that's part of the journey, huh?
For sure. And the learning never really stops.
Mm-hmm.
But even with the challenges, the benefits of integrative therapy are huge.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked about the personalized approach, empowering the client, connecting research and practice. It feels like, I don't know, a real shift in how we think about therapy. But looking forward, where do you see this all going?
Hmm. Well, I think we'll see even more emphasis on personalizing treatment. Technology might play a bigger role. Imagine using sensors to track heart rate, sleep patterns, stuff like that. That could give therapists so much information, help them understand what's really going on.
Wow, that'd be incredible. Like real-time insights into what the